Continuing now because we had a little bit of technical issues with the loading of it, and now we're going to give it another try here. But if you want to watch it in full, you can obviously go subscribe to my channel, but I'm going to pick it back up again, getting into this Peter Beinart article about sexism in the 2016 and 2020 campaigns. This, of course, flawed autopsies of 2016, but I think it is legitimately relevant to how we get ready for the 2020 election, and so that's why I'm kind of bringing it up for you today. So the real reason Biden is ahead of Trump, he's a man, says Peter Beinart. It's a lot easier to run a cautious and offensive campaign when you're not up against a culture of misogyny. But again, I think that's I would definitely say that sexism did play a role in the 2016 campaign, and especially the way that kind of voters viewed her, and as not as much in the 2016 campaign, but also the fact that she was subject to a series of attacks that were, I think, in part made because she's a woman, and some people were making them because she was a woman. A lot of people, I think, especially on the Republican side, were making these attacks, especially for her on, like, for example, like, ever since the 1990s, the moment she stepped in the White House, a brutal, relenting push, really of some pretty sexist, awful, rotten stuff that served to paint her as kind of this kind of uppity, out of touch, corrupt woman that was going to come in and just ruin things. And of course, people have I think probably a negative conception of just proud and out blatant feminism in this country, which I think is a big problem and thing that is, I think people are working to kind of reclaim that mantle for good, because too often I think online people are just like, crazy feminist does this, and it's just like, that's not it's just a stupid way to talk about and to represent feminism, just a blatantly dishonest way of doing so. But yeah, I definitely think sexism does play a role, but I do think also there was a fact that Hillary Clinton was also part of the Clinton dynasty, like running on her years and years of Washington experience at a time where voters clearly thought that Washington experience was a liability. Being in the swamp, quote unquote, was a liability. And again, a majority of voters voted for her, so you can't say a majority of voters were on that side. But the reason why Trump won was, I think, because in part because he was running against someone who was unpopular and was subject to so many attacks. And I think a lot of those attacks came because of sexism, but a lot of those attacks came because she was also very, very corrupt, had this perception of being a Washington insider, and have this perception of kind of being involved in every poor policy, every major bad decision that represented people's so much deep anger at both neoliberalism and the kind of third way triangulation method of politics that was so clearly represented by both Bill and Hillary in their times in public life. And of course, you see the record. Look at the record of the Secretary of State. Like that was a big turnoff for a lot of people on, for example, the left in the 2016 primary. But I do want to get into what he has to say here. A narrative has formed around the presidential race. Donald Trump is losing because he's botched the current crisis. Americans are desperate for competence and compassion. He's offered narcissism and division. He's paying the political price. And I think to a large part, like, that could be described as true, because if you look at what Americans are saying here, if you look at what, like, just the reception to him has been, I think, it also, and look at the way he performed in the primary. He had no campaign on the ground. He had any kind of organization. Like, it was just like it's very, very slapdash, very, very just kind of flying by the seat of your pants and just tumbling your way into a major party nomination. And that is because I think more than anything, a lot of people just wanted to feel normal again. A lot of people just want to be like, let's get this guy out of here. And the guy with the best shot, the guy with the biggest public-facing persona, would be the best guy to take on Trump and win election that we so have to win. But the evidence that Trump's I'm just going to skip down here a little bit. The evidence that Trump's electoral woes stem as much from the gender of his opponent as from his own failures begins with his net approval rating. The percent of Americans who view him favorably minus the percent of who view him unfavorably. Right now, that figure stands at minus 15 points. That makes Trump less popular than he was this spring, but he's still more popular than he was throughout the 2016 campaign, yet he won. So he did this kind of weird jump in popularity after he won, which is very, very strange. But because he was like, if you look at just the moment, if you get pull up his favorability graph here, you can see the way it goes. It kind of starts off, there's a wide gap, approval rating or unfavorability, high 50s, low 60s, and then right around November 8th, 2016, that gap closes right back up. So something about just, I don't know, him being elected made him so popular. Not the campaign really that he was running himself. You just look at the data there. What has changed radically over the past 4 years isn't Americans' perception of Mr. Trump; it's their perception of his opponent. According to Real Clear Politics average, Joe Biden's net approval rating is minus 1 point. At this point in the 2016 campaign, Hillary Clinton's net approval rating was minus 17 points. For much of the 2016 general election, Mr. Trump faced a Democratic nominee who was also deeply unpopular. Today, he enjoys no such luck. And I think, again, you have to look at why that Democratic nominee, I think that's really what he's trying to do here, is look at why that Democratic nominee is so deeply unpopular, right? And that is a big reason why Trump was able to have success and why Joe Biden is less popular at this current time. I think a lot of it is because of that kind of years-long attacks that did come from a sexist perspective, but also came from, again, as I said before, a rejection of the kind of Clinton brand of corporatism, neoliberalism, and politics, and just not even necessarily along kind of like an economic policy basis. Like not everyone was going to be like raising their pitchforks about TPP, but I think a really effective line that Trump deployed to great effect in the debates and other times was like, Hillary Clinton's been in Washington for so long, hasn't solved any of these problems. What makes you think she's going to solve them with another 4 years? That is, I think, a line that he tried to use against Joe Biden. Not as successful, but I think it really did play a big part in getting those kind of voters who just like, yeah, screw the system, throw a brick through the quote-unquote establishment window. And I think looking at these things, sexism, again, it's a big part of the way people see things today, and it can't be, I think, and it is dangerous when it becomes a determining factor for Democratic voters, because in a kind of cyclical effect, almost, you could see the negative effects that it had on electability concerns when a woman tries to run on the Democratic side in 2018, 2020. Can they win? Well, Hillary Clinton had all these problems. Hillary Clinton was treated poorly because that was so much of the establishment excuse in the wake of their 2016 screw-up. So that, I think, supplanted in a lot of Democrats' minds, oh, wait a minute. There's no way that a Democrat can possibly win. There's no way the Democrat can possibly win if they're a woman, because it would be too impossible. We saw with Bernie Sanders in that kind of Elizabeth Warren smear, that same dynamic at play here. Why was Ms. Clinton so much more popular than Biden now? There's a good reason to believe that gender plays a key role. For starters, Clinton wasn't just far less popular than Mr. Biden. She was far less popular than every male Democratic nominee since 1992. Neither Bill Clinton, Al Gore, John Kerry, nor Barack Obama faced overwhelming public disapproval for their general election campaigns that Hillary Clinton did. I'd say Bill Clinton, much better politician than Hillary Clinton. John Kerry, probably not, but then again, he lost. Al Gore, but you look at the two people who won here. Like, they are considered to be extraordinary politicians. Like, really, I mean, in terms of the way they publicly present themselves, the way they connect to people. So I think that has to be factored into it too. And of course, you look at Al Gore and John Kerry; they were unsuccessful. But a major driver in the public's extreme dislike of Clinton was her perception as duplicitous. In a poll taken just days before the 2016 election, Americans deemed her as even less truthful than Trump. By a contrast, in a Pew Research poll late last month, Americans rated Biden as more honest than Trump by 12 points. And again, I think you can say that Hillary Clinton, she did have a perception, I think, that was backed up by some sort of fact, by some sort of evidence, as someone who would come and change her position. Not necessarily that she was lying, but she almost that she was willing to say whatever she wanted to get elected. She was kind of a politician politician through and through, someone who would always push to get elected and say whatever needs to be done to get that across. Not necessarily like kind of a lying woman way. I think that was definitely a way that some people viewed her, but I think that a lot of other people viewed her as a politician who's going to be saying whatever that she wanted to get elected. According to fact checkers, these public perceptions are wildly inaccurate. Political facts, so pretty much saying that, yeah, obviously Trump lies more than Clinton, and obviously Clinton technically tells the truth more. But I think the big thing that hurt her is, again, she was viewed as a politician's politician, where Joe Biden is kind of viewed as like a stumbling old man who was friends with Obama and is probably going to be in office for 4 years, but is just going to kind of take us through and get us out of this crisis. And again, I think a real sense is set in over a lot of the electorate now that's just like, let's just get this over with. We can't be playing around anymore. Like the Trump thing, it was going on, like we were kind of surviving, but now it's just getting off the rails. This sick, wild experiment needs to come to an end, and I think that's why people are really gravitating to Joe Biden in a way that they have never before. All right, that's all the video that we have for you today. If you like this, please be sure to subscribe. It's Uncultured on Friday, Newsflash on Thursday. Subscribe to YouTube now. It's Newsflash on SWRN.